So, hopefully, yes, that's it. So, we're live. Okay.
Wonderful.
Um, so, hi, and welcome to Beautiful Skin with Lille of Lifequest and myself, Sylvain, from PURU, where we aim to help people achieve beautiful skin by sharing knowledge and raising awareness of natural and sustainable living through a series of live streams of casual conversation with some AMAs and questions. So, with just a quick introduction to myself, I'm Sylvain. I grew up on a macro-biotic organic diet and have been making my own personal care since I moved to Zurich over 7 years ago. And I'm very passionate about natural living, products, and sustainability and environment. And yeah, Lil, would you like to just briefly introduce yourself?
Yes, certainly. So I work as a coach and naturopath. I have my own business in Zurich, Lifequest, and my goal is to help people to make the transformations that they need to make in order to live their lives, best lives, sorry, using holistic approaches.
Thank you. Okay, so I think today we, on our first session, want to talk about beautiful skin, and as many know, skin is not only the largest organ of the body, but it's also the largest excretory organ of the body, and I think it really reflects the internal state of your body and mind as well. And acne obviously it's a very common skin condition that affects millions of people worldwide, and certainly for me as well in my teenage years and early 20s it was I did suffer from acne myself, and for me I think it was obviously partially mental but also a lot of lifestyle choices as well. And I think for me the mental part was really tough, and this kind of harsh reality of seeing yourself, not looking at your best as you're growing up and young and all that kind of stuff, can bring you down further and really self-perpetuate itself to making it unpleasant and even worse, right? And yeah, but for me also, I think it was a lot of lifestyle choices as well. And I think to really resolve it, I looked at a lot of my daily habits, and saw some of the things that I was doing every day, and maybe too much of, and certainly like with food groups or certain drinks perhaps, that I was over consuming, and even certain foods that maybe I didn't grow up consuming as well, right? So it's not part of my diet growing up, and then I was over consuming those more in those years, and really self-analyzing my daily habits on certainly diet, I think, and lifestyle really helped me to eventually clear it, and once it starts clearing up, then mentally you're able to handle it more as well. So yeah, I think that's one big part of it. But Lil, I think you have anything to say?
Yes, exactly. So I also have a story to share. It's very similar to yours. I also suffered from acne since, from the time I was a teenager until the time I was in my early 30s. And as in your case, Sylvain, it only really cleared up when I completely changed my lifestyle. And for me, what was a game changer was learning how to detox my body. So after I started learning how to do that, and that really sparked my interest in naturopathy as well, everything cleared as if by magic. And especially after the birth of my daughter, I had a problem with little pimples that were growing under my skin. So I could see these white things that were very hard growing under the skin. So not your typical acne pimple. And then I had also developed rosacea, which, in case no one on the call knows what that is, it's these really nasty red patches that appear on the skin and can be really nasty. And that was a problem that was plaguing me even more than the acne. And according to standard medicine, that is not something that's really curable. But after doing all the detox and changing what I ate and so on, it really completely cleared up. And just to show you on the call, I'm really not wearing any makeup at all. And you can see that I am now completely acne and rosacea free. Also, switching to natural cosmetics made a huge difference because I started to notice that some of the cosmetics that I was using were really irritating my skin and exacerbating the problem.
And what do you think it is about natural cosmetics that causes that? Does it cause a kind of imbalance on the skin, or is it just irritation? And how does natural products maybe
Well,
improve
I
that?
think the problem with a lot of standard cosmetics is that they contain a lot of synthetic substances that the body can tolerate for a while, but not everybody can tolerate them as well. And natural products are just more in sync with one's bodies because we are natural beings. And so these are substances that do not necessarily have the side effects that go along with some of the synthetic products. Like, for instance, if you take parabens, they're considered to be something called a xenoestrogen. So they mimic certain types of hormones in the body, and that disrupts endocrine function.
Hmm. And parabens are mainly used, or certainly were used, I think, in cosmetics as mainly as a preservative, right, to keep to extend shelf life, etc.
Right, exactly. And a lot of these things that are in the non-natural cosmetics are there not because they're good for you, but simply because they extend shelf life. So they make a lot of sense from a business point of view, but they're probably not so great for your health.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that's it's an important point, right? Because as also there is lots of natural alternatives to it as well. Obviously, it's harder to come up with formulations like that, but there's plenty of natural alternatives to helping products, keep good for longer, and but it's harder, right? And I think it takes a lot more effort and more expense perhaps sometimes to produce that. But I think what you touched on there is essentially what is not natural, right? Is when something has gone through a process, right? So it's not only
Mhm.
with natural personal care products that you put on your skin, but also with food and diet, right, as well. And
Mhm.
certainly with like I was saying about daily habits, right? Consuming processed foods, and certainly there's different levels of processed foods can cause more irritation and inflammation inside your body,
Mhm.
and then that can then reflect on your skin, right? And your
Yes,
skin.
absolutely. I mean, it's a well-known fact that fast foods, for instance, or highly processed foods cause inflammation in the body and other changes as well. And if anyone out there would like to test this, what you could do is really eat nothing but fast food for a week or two, and then see what effect this has on your body, on your emotions, on your mental state.
Hmm. Yeah, and then, but it's not only I think fast foods, right? Which are well, I mean, there's lots of issues with fast food, right? It can be from even more processed salt and seed oils, right? The sort of processed seed oils that they use sometimes in the deep fat fryers, but also with refined white sugars, right? In a lot of
Hmm.
processed goods, but also alcohol as well, right?
Hmm.
It can cause a lot of irritation and inflammation.
Um, right, and also, anything that's processed really is in the long run not so terribly healthy. So it's better to eat food that has really been minimally processed, if at all, or better, not really processed at all, to buy fresh foods that you prepare at home.
Yeah, exactly, and obviously, we have a big life choices to make, right? And often social means that we want to see friends and go out to restaurants and live these choices. So it's hard to be perfect, right? But I think we can, if you want to have better skin and it's something you're really motivated to improve, then I think it's starting to see which parts of your lifestyle choices and what you consume can what you can take out and what you can look at and analyze and see what you can improve, then that can really start to make a difference, right?
Mhm. Right, and another reason why a lot of the fast food is bad for you is that unfortunately, even when you make good choices, if you're buying something like a takeaway or so on, is that a lot of the containers that the food is stored in leach,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and those chemicals also are really not so great for you.
yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of the containers are maybe heat proof, right? But you know, to what degree are they heat proof, I guess is the question. And it's this varying quality, as with all things, right? There's varying degrees of quality of everything, right? There's kind of good containers and not so good containers with this kind of thing. And yeah, you know, there's cheaper plastics, right, as well as more robust, and that can definitely leach into the food, and then you're just increasing the toxic load on your body.
Right, exactly. And in naturopathy, the toxic load is something very important because in most cases of really chronic illness, if you go and read the biographies of people who have developed chronic illness, who have actually been able to heal them, um, they always included some kind of major change in lifestyle, which also included using more natural products, not only skincare, but also clearing their homes of a lot of toxic stuff.
Hmm. Yep. And it can also be just your favorite drink every day, right, in your home. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe, you know, a certain machine that you use to make foods or drinks, you know, may be convenient, right? And I think that, but that convenience may come at a cost, right? Where there's an increase in toxicity that can get into your body, right? And that could be
Yeah, and
anything.
it can come from textiles, it can come from paints.
Hmm.
For
Yeah.
example, now we know that asbestos is very, very toxic,
Hmm. Yeah.
but 50 years ago, this was not well known.
Yeah, exactly right. Just anything, right? Really, that you come into contact with, and like you said, clothing as well, right? I mean, um, I have a story where, you know, I wanted the convenience of a non-iron shirt back when I was working in London, and yeah, I was pretty pleased with how I wouldn't have to iron my shirt in the morning, right? With a series of shirts that I bought, but yeah, somehow found out that they were probably using certain chemicals, you know, to achieve that convenience, essentially, right? And you know, some of those chemicals may have been, you know, unnatural synthetic type chemicals that were actually causing, you know, leaching into onto my skin, right, and causing some harm. So I think yeah, it's just really looking at not only what you consume, but yeah, the clothing you wear, but then also the bedding, right, as well. You know, we spend
Hmm.
12, well, you know, depending on how much sleep you get, but for many hours of the night on asleep in your bed, and you know, using even organic cotton sheets, you know, that haven't been treated, or you know, you hope less treated, can certainly make a difference as well. But then also the washing powder, right,
Hmm.
that's used can cause irritation. There's lots of natural washing detergents that are more friendly, and that can definitely have an effect.
Yes, and here in Switzerland, I think there's a lot of awareness about that. That's why Coop has this line, for instance, of fairly natural products that are much less toxic, both for you and the environment.
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a trend, right? And I'm seeing more of it certainly here as well. And it's I think there's a lot more awareness of it. And yeah, it's like you said, it's better for the environment as well, right? Because then if you're not, you know, voting with your wallet essentially of buying products that use synthetic chemicals to treat them, then that discourages down the supply chain to actually not, you know, for companies not to use them,
Hmm.
and to have more natural practices, which then, you know, decreases the demand, the underlying demand for these types of products, and you know, ultimately is better for the environment, right? Because you know, even some of these synthetic chemicals, right, when they're produced, there's other chemicals that are offset when they're made, and they can often end up in the waterways, or end up in the lakes, right, at some point,
Hmm.
or rivers. So it's definitely an interesting thing
Well,
to
and
consider.
other than what you put on your body or what you ingest, I think it's also very important to talk about mental state, emotional state, and also, of course, stress.
Hmm.
Because any time that people are stressed out, that's when they start to manifest a whole slew of problems. And
Hmm.
again, if you ever talk to people who have really serious chronic illnesses, and I come into contact with a lot of them due to my
Hmm.
work as a naturopath, what is very interesting is that at the onset of their illness, they were always going through either a life crisis or a period of very high stress.
Hmm.
I'll give you a concrete example. I had a client a few years ago who worked in a bank, and she was the mother of two young children, an expat. And all of a sudden, she developed horrible psoriasis all over her body. She had always had a bit of psoriasis, but it had never been quite as bad. And it became so bad that she had to stop work because she could no longer wear clothes.
Mm-hmm.
So during the day, she had to remove her clothes and shower and take baths because she just couldn't stand the clothes anymore.
Wow.
And I studied her history and so on and asked her many questions. And she said that her psoriasis had started at university during exams.
Mm-hmm.
So it was at that period of time that it manifested in her body, and before that, she had never had it.
So yeah, I think that's true, right? I mean, the mental sort of aspect of these, of any kind of skin condition, is definitely something to look at, right? And it can be a large percentage of what to look at to try and resolve to improve skin, right? But I mean, obviously, it's really tough, right? Like I said earlier, it's once you have, you know, or you can see yourself with you know, suboptimal skin, let's say, right, with a certain condition, then that can play on your mind mentally, right? And that make the issue worse. So,
Mm-hmm.
what do you usually kind of recommend to, you know, mentally to resolve it? Obviously, there's meditation and things like that, but anything
Yes,
else?
but meditation certainly is very, very helpful. Things like yoga and disciplines like that are also very helpful. But what you really need to do is to learn to manage stress better, because the stress is not going to just go away. Of course, doing things
Mm-hmm.
like sports and meditation, regular yoga can go a long way towards helping you to decrease the stress response. But on a deeper level, there are a lot of hidden drivers that mediate the stress response. And often the way we react to something has a lot to do with subconscious programming that we've developed over many, many years. And in my coaching practice, I see this all the time. And I work a lot on this level also because, in addition to being a coach and naturopath, I'm also a board certified hypnotherapist. And this is one of my areas of specialization. I really work at the intersection of body, mind, and spirit to resolve issues such as, let's say, stress and chronic illnesses and psychosomatic disorders.
Mm-hmm. And does a lot of these maybe orders come from, you know, like childhood trauma that we need to resolve and accept, and you know, and yeah, not living too much in the past, right? So, you know, if you live too far in the past, then you know it causes stress, right? And too far in the future then causes more anxiety, and so, you know, obviously we need to be conscious of the near future and you know, the past to help us make decisions, but yeah, being cognizant of, you know, making the best choices that you can now in the immediate present is
Yes,
important too.
absolutely. A lot of it comes from trauma, but not only.
Hmm.
And not only from childhood trauma, sometimes it comes from other types of trauma and traumatic events that happened later on in life, but
Sure.
also simply from coping mechanisms that perhaps at one time were actually quite useful, but are no longer serving their purpose.
Hmm.
And to give you a concrete example, I have a very nice client who has a pattern of wanting to please everyone and thinking that if he does that, that he will feel loved.
Hmm.
And what's very interesting to observe is that often when he's very stressed out, that he'll get red eyes and he'll start to have manifestations on his face, like red skin and things like that. And so, key for him has been to work at that level to help him to change those coping mechanisms that he developed at one point. Because
Hmm.
as a child, like a lot of children, one wants to please one's parents and the authority figures, but that pattern is no longer serving him too well.
Hmm. And what's the best way to kind of resolve that? I mean, is it maybe questioning uh, whether it's you know, should continue to try and please everyone all the time, or try and take a more objective view upon that, and please people when it's correct, or when it's you know, when it's a better time
Well,
to do it.
having worked with literally thousands of people by now, because I started working as a coach in 2003, so every year I work with a couple of hundred people, I've really come to the conclusion that using combinations of methods is the most effective approach, because you need to be able to target different dimensions, not just working at a cognitive level, but really working on a deeper level, working at a subconscious level where a lot of this programming resides, and then also working at the intersection with the body, because the body is an amazing biocomputer that can store lots of patterns. So I often see, for instance, where people are very stressed out about something, that they'll develop particular aches and pains. Classic symptom of chronic stress is, for instance, lower back pain, which a lot of people have, or pain in the neck and shoulders. And so it is really working at that level that leads to a huge change, and then anchoring it in the present moment so that they can really change their behavioral responses in real time, so to speak.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting, right? So, looking at, you know, restoring the balance in your body just from doing exercises, perhaps, right, on your neck, and like you said, a kind of yoga or even other sort of gentle exercises and stretches that can increase the movement of energy around your body, right, to cause more healing
Yes,
and harmony.
exactly. And in
And then,
naturopathy, we definitely work with a lot of techniques that work with the natural energy of the body. In Ayurveda, there's a lot of knowledge about the nadis, the subtle energy channels. In Chinese medicine, they're called meridians. In traditional European naturopathy, we certainly also use them. For instance, we do a lot of work with auricular therapy, which is ear acupressure, and with lots of massages and techniques that take advantage of dermatomes and things to create better harmony in the body.
yeah, and it's not easy, right? I think many people live very stressful lives, and your, occupation and work can be very consuming, right? I think, and that seems to be increasing somewhat, right, with new technology and different stresses, etc. And yeah, I mean, just even taking a walk, right, and getting a little bit of sunshine, I think, is good, right? If there's nothing else you can do, right, because it's not convenient, and I think we can all go for at least a 10-minute walk, at least, right, and get some fresh air and some feel the wind on your
Right,
face.
exactly. And just to put things in perspective, even prisoners in high security prisons get 1 hour of free time outdoors per day, right? So if you cannot manage to at least give yourself 1 hour of rest and relaxation and perhaps some physical activity, then there has to be something seriously wrong with your life, because you have less time than a convict in a maximum security prison.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy, right? It would be cruel not to let them outside, and yeah, look, I think it's sometimes easy to, not to get outside, right? If we're just so consumed with work, but yeah, I think if certainly if you're, have any kind of condition, right, including skin condition, then yeah, getting at least that bit of outside time and connecting with nature can can definitely help you resolve the mental part of it, right? Because then your mental state will be improved, and then coupling that with better diet and looking at all the other aspects can certainly improve things a lot.
Yes, absolutely. And anytime your stress level goes down, this will also help your skin, because when one is stressed out and the stress response is on, all of the mechanisms that keep us healthy, things like tissue repair, for instance, or digestion, are either dimmed down by the body or switched off.
Yeah.
And so we age faster, and it definitely has a negative impact on our skin.
Yeah, I think so, right? Okay, just changing gears a little bit then on skin conditions and maybe how to treat them. And I think certainly with acne, something I suffered with was how to deal with them, right? Whether to squeeze them and what kind of products to use to calm the inflammation and that kind of stuff. And I think I even used, I would squeeze them just because I thought it'd look better, even though it would cause lots of redness. But then I would put, uh, you know, tea tree oil on the wound, if you like, right, the small wound to help disinfect it and try and heal it. But I also found, some sunshine would reduce the redness a lot as well. But is that really beneficial, do you think, or perhaps not?
I think it really depends on the person because in naturopathy, we really believe that everybody has his or her own hardware and software, so to speak. So not everybody has the same constitution.
Mhm.
So perhaps in your case, it was beneficial to go to the sun, but someone else would really not have done well
Mhm.
getting too much sunlight.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's a good point, right? It's about, there is no one solution for everybody when it comes to, beautiful skin or different conditions, and it's really individual and what works for you, what your lifestyle is, how your life is, and really, it could even be trial and error with different things, or removing certain, substances or habits from your daily life, but also trying new food groups and seeing what works, and even
Yes,
right. Go on.
absolutely. And with a client that has an issue with skin, what I always do is to go really deeply into their medical history, their life history, and so on, and also figure out what kind of constitution they have before coming up with any ideas or solutions. Because something that might be very, very good for person A might actually be quite detrimental for person B,
Hmm.
like tea tree oil. It helped you, but it turns out that I react a little bit allergically to tea tree oil.
Okay.
So once I started using it on a cut I had on my foot, and it was awful. It just got really, really swollen.
Hmm. Oh, well. Yeah, I think that's an important point, right? It's looking at, inwards to yourself and what you can do to try and help improve your general well-being. And yeah, it's not the same for everybody, right? Because, like I said, even for me, it was looking at, certain food groups perhaps that I didn't actually consume growing up, right? They weren't part of my diet growing up, and consumption of that particular food group for me maybe was causing some irritation and inflammation and hormonal reactions, right? And I think when I sort of looked at that and cut that out, then I think it really started to help, and then that got the ball rolling really, where when you can see an improvement, then your mental state can improve as well, like I said,
Mhm.
and yeah, then overall you can start to see some real benefits.
Do we have any questions from the audience?
I think we have a few viewers, so if we have any questions, we're open to receive any questions if we have. But otherwise, I did touch on the sun there as well, right? So, what's your general view on the sun? I mean, personally, I think some sunshine is good, and with PURU, we obviously sell some 100% natural sun care and sunscreen, and yeah, we our motto is more that some sunshine is okay, but make sure you use a natural sunscreen, not to um, you know overexpose your skin to the sun and cause any burning, right? Because that
Mhm.
naturally hurts, and if something hurts, then that probably means it's your body sending a signal to your brain to say that something's not right.
Well, yes, and sunlight can be very beneficial. It is well documented in a lot of the literature that we need some sun, for example, for the production of vitamin D.
Hmm.
In countries like Switzerland, where we don't have a lot of sunlight in the wintertime, this is why most people have to supplement with vitamin D so that we do not become deficient.
Hmm.
And however, as you mentioned, too much sun is detrimental for you, and not everybody has the same tolerance to sun,
Hmm.
depending on your complexion. So I would say sun is okay in moderation.
Hmm.
Very sensitive areas of the skin should be protected if you are going to spend a lot of time in the sun. Of course, if you go out for 10 minutes, it's not a big deal if you're the average person. But if you're going to spend 3 hours on a lake somewhere or on a mountain, then if you don't apply anything, you probably will get burnt.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think you touched on a lot of variables, basically, right? Where altitude and yeah, skin type, but also yeah, even being on the water, right? Where the reflection of the
Mhm.
UV rays can make it more intense. And I think
Mhm.
even on a boat in Thailand in my twenties, I got some burn that was far worse than it should have been because of the reflection on the water. I think it was right, the
Mhm.
causing a bit more intensity. But yeah, I think but you said obviously in Switzerland that yeah, like in the winter there is less sunshine, right? It depends
Mhm.
on where you are, I guess. But how can you supplement vitamin D in the winter? Is it certain food groups that can
Well,
provide
usually the way
additional?
it's done is that you take a supplement,
Hmm.
and there's a very wide palette of supplements on the market that one can buy, and depending on one's needs, one can adjust the dosage.
Hmm. And you think that obviously, as with all things, right? There's good and not so good, or beneficial and less beneficial. But um, supplements, I guess it very much depends on how they're produced and processed, and what's
Mhm.
used inside of them. But uh, what's your thought on that?
Yes, absolutely. Just as with cosmetics.
Hmm. So yeah, obviously having higher, if you want to take supplements, then having higher quality supplements would make more sense. But is there any other foods as well? Any food groups that can also induce production of vitamin D? Because the sun is not direct, it doesn't give you vitamin D. It just helps the skin or the body produce vitamin D, right?
Right. And, I think that the problem is the amount that you would have to take of a natural food to get enough of something to, let's say, raise the levels. So obviously, if you're well nourished, this in general is a good thing. For
Hmm.
example, there are fortified cereals that have added vitamin D, um, cod liver oil and fish. These are the things that are usually recommended.
Hmm. But for things like the cod liver oil, is it not better just to have some fresh fish perhaps, as opposed to a processed supplement, or what do you think?
As I said, it's basically the amount that you'd have to ingest
Hmm.
in order to have the same benefit.
Okay, yeah.
And there are also some types of, for instance, mushrooms that also contain some vitamin D
Hmm. Oh,
officially. And with respect to the amount, there's a lot of controversy about how much we really need,
mm-hmm.
with some people arguing that we need about 800 international units per day, and others saying, no, you need a lot more than that.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it's really something that's become a bit controversial. But a lot of people are deficient, and that also can affect one's skin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there are certain places in the world that have more year-round sunshine where people are less sick, right, or get less colds
Hmm.
and flus, let's say,
Hmm.
especially during that winter time. Um, so it definitely is a factor, right?
Right, exactly.
But what about then also air quality and things like that? Can that have an effect on obviously the toxic load, right? And you know
Right, and in
ultimately.
naturopathy, what we believe is that the dirtier your body is, so the higher toxic load is, the more the organs that help us to excrete toxins will be overloaded. And
Hmm.
then when these organs are very, very overwhelmed, then a lot of them tend to resort to using the skin to try to get the stuff out.
Hmm.
So, from a naturopathic perspective, this is why it is so good to detox, and how detoxification, what you call Entschlackungen in German,
Hmm.
really has a very positive effect on skin.
Hmm. Sure, yeah. And are there any particular ways or or recommended detox methods that you would say? I mean, obviously now more and more people are aware of fasting or juicing, I think, as well, right?
Right, and again, it's something that's very individual.
Mm-hmm.
It really depends on your constitution and your general state of health and what issues you're trying to tackle. So for my patients, I always provide a completely individualized program of
Mm-hmm.
detoxification because there is no one size fits all kind of approach.
Yeah.
Because, say, a particular detox program that might be really, really good for one person could actually wind up being detrimental for the other person, might
Mm-hmm.
leave them feeling quite weak.
Yeah, and I think that's the important point, right? It's looking at, like we said, look at yourself and an individual basis, really, what could be the issues, right? And
Right, and
obviously,
just to give
go on.
you an example, today in the morning I had to deal with an acute case of a patient that called because she was feeling very sick because she had decided, against my advice, to take some supplements against parasites that a
Mm-hmm.
friend of hers had recommended. So she bought this product and took it, and this is a patient that already has some chronic issues, and she was really doing very, very badly. She felt dreadfully ill and so on. And this is just an example of how something that can actually be well tolerated and good for one person can really be very bad for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
As they say, one man's food is another man's poison, and it's so true.
Really, yeah. But what kind of parasites, sort of internal parasites, like in the gut and
Yes,
intestines, or
exactly,
this kind of
right.
thing, yeah?
Intestinal parasites.
And where do these generally come from? I've heard of this, right? This notion of the body being full of parasites and this kind of thing. But where do they come from? Is it just from foods or different
They come
foods?
from food. Sometimes they come from animals that we come into
Yeah.
contact with, also from
Okay.
the environment.
Mhm.
hmm And some of them can be really nasty things because they weaken our bodies and have toxins that can wreak havoc
Mhm.
in our systems.
Interesting. And what's the best way to try and rid them? Obviously, like I said, fasting maybe, but certain
Um,
food groups like chili, ginger, garlic can also.
well, there are herbs that can take care of literally all of them,
Mhm. Okay.
and some of them are more resistant than others.
Mhm. And how do you know if you have parasites, right? I mean, how
Um,
would you
it's,
assess?
it's a really good question. You can do a stool test and send
Okay,
it to
yeah.
a lab, and then they have different procedures for
Mhm.
figuring out if you have parasites. The most modern technique is using genetic testing to see if they find the signature of these parasites.
Mhm.
And by the way, what's really interesting is that they can also give you skin rashes or cause problems on the skin level.
Mhm. And what are these
Also,
parasites?
water,
Yeah,
by
go
the
on.
way, I just forgot to mention water can also be a source of parasites.
Sure, yeah. So even when you're swimming on the lake, you shouldn't drink or accidentally swallow too much of
Yeah.
the water, right?
Well,
Um,
ideally not. Yeah, exactly. But I think here in Switzerland we live in a fairly clean environment, comparatively speaking. Not that we're
yeah.
parasite free, but
Mhm.
yeah. hmm
Yeah, but I think it's one thing to be mindful of, right? Yeah, it's interesting, the the, the whole parasites part, but yeah. Um, and then in Switzerland, obviously, they say that it's said that the um, average, uh, length of life is higher, right? And often people say it's about chocolate, but I don't think it's necessarily about chocolate, right? The Swiss do consume a lot of chocolate, but I think it's more about lifestyle and air quality and that kind of thing, right?
Well, and I personally also think that as a group, Swiss people are usually quite active and athletic and
Hmm.
quite focused on living a healthy life, much more so than in other countries.
Yeah, I think so. There's a sort of social pressure to live more naturally and healthy, but yeah, I
And I
think.
think they're also really good with holidays.
Hmm. Yeah.
They take their holidays very seriously here,
Hmm.
which I
Not
think
only
is great.
not only in Switzerland, but also many people go outside, right, to surrounding countries.
Mhm.
Italy, Austria, very popular.
And
with
whereas in other countries, the kind of national activity is to go and just hang out with friends in a restaurant,
hmm
what the Swiss do is they go walking, they go hiking
yeah.
or biking or really spend lots of times outdoors, which I think is great.
hmm Yeah, and that's one thing that I do think about sometimes, with, not only with sort of seasonality of foods, and that kind of thing, but also, if you're living higher up in the mountains, is a diet, of maybe more meat and cheese,
Mm.
can be, more acceptable to the body when you're in an environment that actually, where it's easier to have meat and cheese, right? And vegetables grow
Mhm.
less. Does that mean that even your diet could contain less vegetables if you're in an environment that vegetables would not grow as easily in? Do you think? Or
I think it's an interesting question, and I don't think it's something that is well understood. Like, traditionally Swiss people were also quite healthy.
mm-hmm,
Um, but I don't think they ever really consume very large amounts of meat.
mm-hmm, yeah,
And if you compare just the amount of meat that the average Swiss person consumes in comparison with other countries where meat consumption is very high, like say the US,
mm-hmm,
you simply cannot compare it. Even the meal size here is tiny in comparison to the average meal size in the US.
mm-hmm, yeah,
And also, meat here is much more expensive. So, just that means that people buy small amounts and consume smaller amounts.
mm-hmm, yeah. And certainly, I think the animals are generally a bit more happier here, right? I think you know, I see the cows in the field sometimes, and they look very happy, and well kept, right? I mean, obviously Switzerland is an extremely well kept place, right, comparatively speaking, and yeah, I'm sure that has an effect, right, on the quality of the meat and nutrients it contains and that kind of thing, which can help your overall body's balance.
Yes, of course.
But yeah, I think it's the mental side is really important, right? So how do you think it's best to really motivate oneself to be better? Let's say an example of, and I think it affects lots of people right these days is stressful careers and tough working environments. What's the Is there any kind of way that you see people can make improvements to that? Obviously without taking any drastic decisions, but trying to improve, the general um, handling of daily life in terms of work and career.
Well, again, it's a really individual thing because
Mm.
a situation, or let's say something that has happened, life event that is very stressful for one person, is not necessarily so stressful for another, for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I find that really fascinating when I talk to clients that even if they have very similar lives, what stresses them is usually very different.
Mm. Yeah.
And yes, of course, if you have too many tasks and too little time, this tends to stress most of us, but it's not just that, it's how you cope with it
Mm-hmm.
and your individual psychology that really makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I guess finding the symptoms of what's causing you stress, right? Like you said, with yourself, and trying to get to the bottom of that, right? Just looking at what's going through the chain of thought perhaps that leads to you feeling stressed or even breaking out with certain skin conditions, and looking at that chain and what's really starting it, and getting to the
Yes,
source of the
exactly.
issue. Yeah.
And for me, what's most fascinating are really those hidden drivers that I mentioned earlier on in our AMA,
Mm-hmm.
because those are things that you cannot control consciously. And so far, the best method that I have found for dealing with them are combinations of manual therapies and hypnotherapy,
Mm-hmm.
because then you really work at that intersection between subconscious mind, the mind, and the body.
Mm-hmm. And how does hypnotherapy help? Is it kind of getting deep into someone's mind, essentially, right? To make
Well,
suggestive. Um,
hypnotherapy is really
yeah.
a a state of concentration of the brain,
Mm-hmm.
which is purely natural. And in professional hypnotherapy, we can induce it through a series of cues. And that essentially allows us to kind of open that door to the subconscious mind so that we can clear a lot of the negative program and substitute positive programming instead.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had amazing cases where this had a huge impact on people's health. And to give a concrete example that is related to skin, I had a client that had developed these horrible rashes that
Okay.
would come on and on again, and the doctors had no idea why this was happening. They would come in almost in a cyclical way. And then we did some hypnotherapy, and it turned out that she felt all this red, angry energy inside because her best friend had died and she felt abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
So when we cleared all of those negative emotions and that negative program that she had created at the time when her best friend had died, she stopped having the rushes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess it's rationalizing with yourself to accept these, these traumas, right? Internally
Yes, and
and
that there's been research that's a lot of research actually has been done on hypnotherapy, and in one case there was a famous research study where they compared patients in burn units, and in one group they used hypnotherapy in addition to standard medical care, and in the second group there was no hypnotherapy, it was just a kind of placebo.
mm-hmm.
And in the first group the rate of healing was much better and there was a lot of less scarring.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Because I think that that kind of brings an interesting point where, you know, most of us probably already know what's not too good for us, right? But we like to harm ourselves and do it anyway, right? So it's actually how do you bring yourself to stop doing these things, right? Whatever it may be for you personally.
Yes,
For me,
exactly.
it's probably drinking too much wine, right, or whatever, on occasion, and yeah, I know it's not beneficial, probably at all, right? Even for the mental numbing of whatever I'm trying to cover up, it's doing, and yeah, it's really trying to how do you kind of get yourself out of this loop, right? It's
Mhm.
and like I said, it's programming, right? It's like, oh, it's Friday, I must have a beer, basically, right, or whatever it may be.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
certainly, growing up in the UK, where it's very a part of the culture, right, to to socialize with alcohol. It's really becomes a part of your life in a way, right? And I'm, trying to drink a bit less now, right, and help improve my own state of being. But it does really help you mentally as well, right? There's a whole kind of series of benefits that can happen when when you do that. But yeah, just coming to terms with why you do it and accepting the reasons and then help you overcome that can then make you stop doing it to yourself, right? And stop self-harming, essentially, right? Is what it is.
Yes, and the really interesting thing is that often the people that have realized that something, a behavior is actually quite bad for them, and they really desperately want to stop it, but they can't seem to stop themselves from doing it. And
Hmm.
that's where it gets really interesting, and that's when it's really subconscious programming that is kicking in.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's where it's good to see someone like yourself, right? Where if they know that they're going to see you next week and you're going to ask them if they've continue to self harm themselves, maybe that's a motivator in itself, right? To stop it and do it less. Um,
Well, the best motivator is really to really want to affect that change because you realize that that is going to lead to a
mhm.
tremendous positive change in your life.
Yeah.
And my job is simply to provide the structure and to serve as a catalyst for change.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly right, and it's a motivator as well, and I think that makes a lot of sense, right? Just to try and break that habit, right, and do something different sometimes, right? I think we can kind of, end up having living on autopilot in a very automated way, right, where we have our schedule and our set way of doing things, and sometimes maybe you just need to break that or change some parts of that you know automation in order to change the things that you're doing that you know
Hmm.
you even know that are causing harm to your body that can ultimately reflect in your skin.
Hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, interesting, right? So yeah, I think obviously the natural products and skincare is very much aligned with naturopathy and homeopathy, right? Where certain things can even help your mental well-being, and certain herbs and even oils can help with your mental state that that can help improve that and act as a motivator to stop doing these things, right?
Yes, exactly. I mean, in naturopathy, what we try to do is that we try to harmonize functions in the body so that it works as well as possible, also harnessing the natural life force. And any time that we ingest or consume or live in a way that is in misalignment with the harmony that our body is trying to express, we're going to get sick.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I think most people don't really realize, right, that a lot of the synthetic ingredients you find in many you know uh, you know products that they use, right, such as perfumes or certain deodorants and makeup, foundations, etc. You know that can really cause an imbalance in the body, which also affects your mental state, right? That can actually even mentally bring you down, which may even lead to you doing these anything that does cause self harm, right? Whether it's alcohol or certain food groups, fast food or whatever, that kind of thing. So,
Well,
we.
right, exactly. Anything that adds to your kind of environmental load
Hmm.
is something that is going to be to your detriment sooner or later, in one way or another.
Hmm. Yeah, and that can even lead to maybe a lack of sleep, right? So certain and like you said, it's very individual, right? So a certain product may just be causing more inflammation or irritation to yourself, and that can lead to a number of different things, which then lead to ultimately to a less enjoyable mental state that can lead to that reflecting on your skin and yeah, trying to look at everything you're doing, right? Like we said before, it's not just the products, but your lifestyle and life choices, but even maybe the friends you keep as well, right? Maybe I'm not saying to question who you spend time with, right? But it's certainly spending time with people that can improve your mental state, and encourage you and motivate you certainly can help you make better choices in life.
Oh, absolutely. We do know that social pressure plays a huge role in the choices that people make.
Hmm. And what kind of social pressures do you mean? Like
Well,
things
for
like.
example, classic example are teenagers. They're trying to figure out who they are, and they're
Hmm.
strongly influenced by their peers.
Yep. So it's yeah, the peer pressure to do or be a certain way, right? Whether it's
Right, or to
fashion, could be
consume
fashions,
certain
yeah,
types of right, or
yeah.
consume certain types of substances because they are simply in.
Hmm. Yeah, maybe, yeah. And I think there's a lot of different things now, right, that are available, and yeah, that can have a negative effect on your mental state as well, right? If it's
Hmm.
maybe make you feel good at the time, but that can only make it worse when it's over, right? In
Hmm.
certain ways like that. Yeah, I think that's an interesting way to look at it, right? And yeah, you know, making big decisions like that could really have a positive effect, right? And it's not, and I'm not saying, you know, change who you spend time with, but maybe if you spend or just try and spend less time with certain people that you think maybe are having a bad influence on you, then just to see if it makes a difference, right? And if that's maybe leading to you feeling really bad mentally, and that's affecting the way you appear and look and your skin, then it might be worth just changing variables, right? Like I said before, with daily habits, and maybe daily habits could be, certain influential factors with who you spend time with, and questioning and looking at those, and maybe making small adjustments to those variables, and see what works for you, right, individually.
I think we're coming to the end of the AMA,
Hmm.
and we might want to start wrapping it up, Sylvain.
Yeah, I think so. I think that was a great conversation, right? And really some really interesting topics that I think we discovered. And I think overall, yeah, the conclusion really from this is that it's very individual, and looking at everything that you do, right, and looking at your own past and history, and traumas, and trying to accept who you are as a person, and what you've done, and where you can go, and looking at all of those things, as well as what you consume and what products you use, that can really all together affect of how your own internal body is, and how that reflects on your skin, which is ultimately what most people see, right? I mean, obviously, see your skin is a reflection of your your mental and bodily health, and there's a lot of factors, right, as we discussed.
Absolutely.
All right. Any other thoughts from yourself on that?
Well, I just want to say that if any of our viewers are interested, they're welcome to send me an email or ask questions.
Yep. And you're available, I think, in the description, right, on lifequest.ch,
That's right,
where
yes.
people are able to make a consultation. Yeah, I think there's a lot of benefits, right, and knowledge that you have that can help a lot of people.
Yeah, it would be my pleasure.
Yeah, and certainly, so even for myself, right? Obviously, I have PURU, which is 100% natural personal care based out of Switzerland, on puru.ch. But also, we do have a free ebook that we can send if anyone wants to join the community email, which they can sign up for in purusuisse.com. And if you sign up for the email newsletter there, then we can send you a free PDF, which just gives you a general overview on different skin conditions, and what kind of natural remedies are available, to look at that, as a part of an overall more natural living and sustainable lifestyle. But I think with that, then let's wrap it up. And thank you very much, Lille. I think that was really interesting. And yeah, let's do it again soon. And we hope everyone has a great evening.
Thanks, Sylvain.
All right. Thank
Lovely
you then.
talking to you. Bye-bye.
Bye bye. You too.